Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 18 of the Journey Running podcast. Thank you for joining me today. Today, we have a great episode on training and preparing for the Western States 100. Once again, I am your host, Stefan Schuster, ultra runner coach and registered dietitian. I got into Western States back in December through the lottery with 5 years, otherwise known as 16 tickets in the lottery. So got very lucky this year. And I'll also be running the Leadville 100 in August. So today I want to talk about all the different aspects of training and logistics to prepare for this monster of a race. Before we get started, I do want to remind everybody that this podcast is not sponsored in any way, shape, or form. I am not an ambassador for any brand. If you would like to support me and the show, please remember to like, rate, comment, subscribe. I would really appreciate it if you are looking for a running coach, or if you know a friend who is looking for a running or ultra running coach or a registered dietitian. Please do keep me in mind. I would appreciate any referrals. Like I said, everything I do here is I'm not paid for it. Alternatively, you can also support me by very recently I updated my website with a few downloadable items. There's actually one that's free. It's just a 2025 training calendar. You can download it, print it out, write your running schedule on it, or make your own training plan with it. I also have quite a few documents that I've uploaded. If you go to the training plans and guides on my website, journeyruncoaching.com, once again, that's journeyruncoaching.com. I have a whole bunch of guides, for example, how to create your own training plan. I have a whole guide on how to do that. I have a guide on strength training for ultra runners. I have a few generic training plans, so you don't need to come to me to customize one for you. That means for the 200-mile distance and for the marathon distance. I do have others that I'm working on. Obviously, there's a lot of other ultra distances, 50K, 50-mile, 100K, 100-mile. I'm still working on some generic plans to put on the website. But if you'd like to support me in other ways or financially, you can always go onto my website. I don't have like a donate button, but you're welcome to purchase any of those guides, and hopefully you find it helpful. I put a lot of work and time into all those documents. Some of them are like 20 pages long and very, very detailed with examples as well. I'd really appreciate it if you support me. But with all of that said, let's get right into today's episode. So training and preparing for the Western States 100. Where shall I start? Let's see. So I got into the race in December through the lottery. So it's actually kind of a long time from the second that you get into Western States to the actual race. I mean, it is today, this year, the Western States 100 is taking place on Saturday, June 28th through Sunday, June 29th. It's a pretty late Western States. I think that's like the latest in the month of June that it could possibly be. With that said, that's like 6 full months of 2025, plus you have most of December. You basically have 7 months of time between when you get in through the lottery to race day to prepare. First of all, I should say getting into Western States was really quite an honor. I could not believe it. I wasn't expecting to get in. I wasn't even watching the lottery. I was volunteering at a race that day, and my friend texted me in all caps and spelled my name wrong in like a group chat. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, did I just get into either Western States or Hard Rock or what? Because somebody seemed really excited, and I wasn't watching the lottery that day. And yeah, sure enough, I got into Western States. It was quite emotional. I started running around and gave a few friends that I was at a race volunteering, gave a few people a big hug, and then proceeded to cry on the way home. It's quite an honor. I've wanted to run Western States since I was 14 years old and read Ultramarathon Man by Dean Karnazes. So it has been quite the journey to get to this point. I really feel like running Western States is a celebration of many years of dreaming, but also, when you're 14 years old, you don't really understand how life works. You think that success is, or at least I thought success was quite linear. I was like, oh, okay, in high school, I'm running cross country and track. In college, I'll run marathons, and then I'll go run ultra marathons. And while that was essentially the path that my life did follow, there were a lot of peaks and valleys that were unforeseen you know, by a young, naive version of me at 14 years old. So, running Western States is something I have been looking forward to for many years, but it is also a really cool celebration of really the journey to get there. It's been quite an awesome ultra running career, and yeah, this has always been kind of like a North Star dream of mine to accomplish. So, been putting a lot of time and effort into my training cycle for this. I've been training about 3 to 4 hours a day for the last 4 months. I'm recording this on Thursday, June 12th for reference. So, actually just did my last long run for Western yesterday. I'm a big fan of the 2.5 week taper. So, and my work schedule affords me the ability to do that. So, I should back up though. Let's start talking about like what actual training looks like. So, when I got into Western States, and keep in mind, everything I talk about here is not just pertinent to Western States. A lot of the topics that I'm going to talk about in this episode will also be applicable to really any ultra marathon that you're running, especially if you're really trying to dial in your performance from a data-based perspective. It doesn't have to be Western States what you're training for. Heat training, like when I talk about that in this episode, there's a lot of hot races out there. So you can take what I talk about in this episode and apply it to quite a variety of different events that exist. But yeah, so when I got into Western States, the first thing that I did, as I do with really any event that I'm training for, and I note this in my How to Build a Training Plan, which you can purchase on my website under the training plans and guides if you're interested in learning how to build your own training plan. The first thing I talk about in that document is like when I get into a race, we'll say that a race that we're taking seriously from performance-based perspective. What I mean by that is not every ultra marathon you run, or at least that I run, I'm not training all out for. There's some races I just run for fun. So I'm not going to do things like speed work or specificity, or I'm not really trying to dial in my nutrition for every single event that I run. But if you are, then the first thing I would do is recommend dividing your training into phases. So that's always going to be the first step. Divide your training into phases. And this shouldn't really be surprising to anyone, at least who is a experienced runner or ultra runner. Most, I would say, even half marathoners, high schoolers, marathoners know that the first thing you want to do when you're getting ready for an upcoming season or event that you're training for is build a base. So that's what I focused on. December, January, February, strictly base building. I did not do any runs at a high intensity pace. And then I moved that into speed work. So my plan when I got into Western States was to emphasize speed workouts and speed sessions plus long runs in March and April. And then in May, I decided that I wanted to do a 50 miler. So I ended up running the Quad Rock 50 miler as a kind of just like a practice run for Western States. So I did that in May, and then the last phase of my training plan was to basically fine tune everything that I had been working on. So long runs, speed workouts, heat training, physical therapy, just in the case that anything was bothering me. So just fine tuning was basically what I called my last few weeks of training. And then, of course, the last phase would be tapering. So I built this training plan out in December, and I essentially followed it to a T. So let me talk about a little bit more what each of those phases look like. So for phase one, building a base. So like I said before, December, January, February, I only focused on easy, low intensity, so zone 1, zone 2 miles that I was getting in. Everybody's different. It really depends at what phase you are in your running career, how injury resistant you are, how many miles per week can you tolerate. I did not want to do anything too differently going into Western States because I didn't really feel like this was the time to tinker with my training and decide to start running 100-mile per weeks, because that's not traditionally what I've done. I am a very consistent 70 to 75 mile per week runner when I am in a base building phase. And that's what I've done in the past, and that's what I am decided to do this year. So basically every single week of January and February, I ran 70 miles, no more, no less. I'm sure there were a few 73-mile weeks or whatever, but that's what I did. I didn't really do any long runs. Every day was very, very, very consistent. I ended up running like 300 miles, 310-ish miles in January. I ran like 270 or 280 in February. So just like straight up like 10 miles a day. There was one caveat actually. I did do a 15-hour race in February. I ran the Endure 15-hour. My goal was originally to run 100K during that, but my gosh, conditions during that event were pretty crazy. There was I think there was like snow a few days before the race, and it all melted by race day. So in the morning, there was like a lot of frozen mud on the course. And by like hour 3 or 4, there was just a ton of mud. And then a few hours after that, it started to like snow. And then, it was nighttime, and, it just, it was not like conditions for a fast day. So I took it relatively easy, low intensity. I ended up running like 52 or 53 miles over the course of 15 hours. That is not particularly fast, but it was a great time on feet kind of day. That is the only real long run I did in December, January, February timeframe. And after that event, I basically took it easy for a week, and then that brought me into March. So, just to backtrack a little bit, that's what I did. What you should do if you are preparing for an event is figure out what you want your base building to look like. I run pretty consistently year round, so I didn't really have to build up to 70-mile weeks because this is a personal preference. I run year round. One of my personal goals is to run 200 plus miles per month every month. I've been doing that for it's June now, so of 2025. I've been doing this for this will be 30 months of running over 200 miles per month. So that's my version of a run streak. I don't run every single day, but I have a monthly goal that I shoot for every month. And what you should do is figure out like what a good base looks like for you. Do you have to build up to it? You might need some time to build up to maybe you're running 45 miles a week or 50 miles a week or 60 miles a week. Hell, maybe you are running 100 miles per week. So just do what you got to do to build up to that, and then hold that consistently for a period of time. Keep your volume, like your intensity, pretty easy, and just focus on straight volume. That's what you do if you're in a base building phase. So phase number 2, speed work and long runs. For Western states, I knew that it's a fast course. If you look at the course profile, it looks like it's all downhill. It's a bit deceiving. There is still 18,000 feet of gain with 23,000 feet of descent. So it is a net downhill course, but 18,000 feet of gain is no joke, nothing to be laughed at. There's still a lot of climbing that you have to be able to do during the race. Outside of the first climb, which is a 3,000-foot ascent up the ski resort at Squaw Valley, or what do they call it, Olympic Valley now, that's 3,000 feet over like 3 miles. You do have to be able to be a strong, probably hiker for a good section of that first climb. But my understanding is a good chunk of the vert during the race, so that leaves 15,000 feet over the course of 97 miles, is supposedly pretty runnable from what I understand. And same thing with the descents. There's quite a few sections during Western states where, for example, from, let's do a course overview. Now's a good time for that. So you have that 3,000-foot climb at the beginning, and then you are running through the Granite Chief Wilderness. Basically, for the first 30 miles, you descend down to Duncan Canyon at mile 25, and then you go up to Robinson Flat at mile 30. And then from Robinson Flat at mile 30 to mile 43, you have a 13-mile, so essentially a half marathon descent that's 2,000 feet down over 13 miles to Last Chance, and that's at mile 43. So Last Chance at mile 43 through Forest Hill at mile 62 is the canyon section. So, if you're dividing this race up into sections, I would say, think of that first 30 miles as kind of a gritty 30 miles, you have that big ascent, and then you're running through the Granite Chief Wilderness, which is the section of the course that on many years has a lot of snow and water. It's going to be probably slower than what it looks like on paper. As any great ultra runner or experienced ultra runner knows, a vert chart, elevation chart doesn't tell the full story of what a course looks like. And I have a feeling that the Granite Chief Wilderness is going to be a bit slower than even I expect going into the race. But then once you get to Robinson Flat at mile 30, you have a beautiful 13.1 mile descent. And, and then you have the canyon section, which is the meat of the race. If you were an ultra runner in North America, this 20-mile section is the section that like you're really dreaming of if you want to run Western States. Like this is the meat of the race. You descend down and then up through 3 canyons. I know one of them's El Dorado Canyon. The third one is Volcano Canyon. I am blanking on the first one. Anyways, I'm just trying to do a quick course overview. So, you have quite a few up and downs. But then from mile 62, once you get to Robinson Flat, once you get to Forest Hill at mile 62, you have another 16-mile descent down to the American River, which is where the famous Rucky Chucky River crossing is. And then you have basically 22 miles of rollers to the finish line. The reason I give this overview now is because when we talk about speed work, Western States has a lot of great opportunities for really fast runners. I mentioned 2 of them already. The first one is from mile 30 at Robinson Flat to Last Chance at mile 43, 13 miles, 2,000-foot descent, pretty non-technical California trails, single track, should be perfect running for somebody who has practiced running fast and who has emphasized downhills during their training. So that's why speed work is so important for an event like this. You have a great opportunity there. Plus, at mile 62, Forest Hill to the river, the American River, that's another 16 miles of straight descending. I know there's some rollers in that section, but it is very much net downhill. And, if you add that up, that's 29 miles of the race. That's essentially all downhill. With no major climbs in between those sections. So a third of the race, essentially, you need to be a good, fast, strong downhill runner for. And that's why I think speed work is so important, because you don't want to sprint down those descents, at least for someone like me. I'm not trying to go out there and win the race. But if you are trying to finish the race in sub 24, if you're just trying to finish the race at all, you do want your easy pace to be faster than, something that you want it to be faster than not. I don't know how else to put it. That's why speed work is so important, as it makes your easy runs faster. So I've been doing quite a bit of speed work. I started that in phase 2 of my training in March. So my favorite kind of workouts are running 4 miles at your threshold pace. For me, that's about a 6:30 pace. Sometimes I can run a little faster. Some days I'm a little slower, but 6:30 pace. And then I go up to 6 miles at that pace, and then 8 miles at that pace. And then I built up to 10 miles at a 6:30 pace. And I did that workout in late April. The reason and I also dispersed long runs throughout my training in March and April. So I would essentially do like a 20+ miler every other week. And I was doing my big speed workouts every other week as well. So what I would do is, let's say one week I was doing like 70 miles, and I would include a 20+ mile long run that week. The next week I would also do 70 miles, but instead of doing a long run, I would disperse the workouts that week, where most, if not all, of the runs were about 10 miles, give or take a few miles. But in those easier weeks without a long run, I would do like a more intense threshold like speed session. And then every 4th week I would make every 4th week a down week, not because I felt like I needed to, but just to make sure that I was staying fresh. So for me, what that meant was I would do 70 miles, 70 miles, 70 miles, and then week 4, I would do like 55 miles. So that was about a 20% decrease in mileage. That's how I trained in March and April. You can take those principles and apply it to your calendar as well if you'd like. If it sounds complicated, reach out to me. I am a coach. I am a dietitian. I can teach you how to do this on your own. Or if you don't want to customize it yourself, I can make your schedule for you and coach you. So I essentially did all of that in March and April, and then that took us to May. So in May, I ran the Quad Rock 50 miler. I did this as a tune-up race for Western States. I wanted to see basically how my body would respond to a long effort. I am of the belief that, being just myself, I would say a veteran ultra runner at this point. I've run 10 100 milers, 200 milers. So that's 12 efforts in total that are 100 miles or more, plus all the other 50-mile races, 100K races, 50K races I've done. It comes out to a lot. I don't know. I've done something like 30 official ultras, but there's a lot of unofficial ultras I've done, just as 28 30-mile training runs. If you count through hiking days, I've done probably 2 or 3 weeks worth of at least marathon or more hiking days. So my body can really handle long runs. If you're a new ultra runner, a question I get a lot is, should I be running a 50 miler while I'm training for my first 100? Honestly, I handle that on a case-by-case basis. I think it depends on how fast do you think you can recover from your previous running experience, which, it's really hard. If you've never run a 100 miler or you've never run a 50 miler, it's really hard to tell how quickly your body will bounce back from that. But I personally don't think you need to run a 50 miler leading up to 100. At a certain point, there's too many negative consequences of running really far in your training. I think anything past a 50K is not necessary if you're training for your first 100, because you're going to get more strength out of being consistent. But a lot of people, they want to know they can run 50 miles before the 100. And if you're somebody where if you don't run further than a 50K in your training, if you think that mentally that's going to fuck you during your 100-mile attempt, your first one, then you should probably go run a 50 miler, because physically it might not be the best thing for your training. You got to taper for it. You got to recover for it. You don't know how recovery is going to go. Physically it might do more damage, but mentally it might help you more. Anyways, that's a tangent. All that to say, I know myself, I know my body. I can personally recover from a 50 miler within like 1 to 2 weeks. I can recover from 100 milers at this point within like 7 to 14 days. So I knew that it wouldn't be too risky to run a 50 miler 7 weeks out, because I know myself, I know my body and what works. Anyways, the Quad Rock 50 miler went really well. I had 3 goals going into it, and this is really important for anyone who is training for an important A race. If you are training for an A race on your calendar, and note that not every race on your calendar can be an A race. Not everything is an event that you can go all out for. If you do that, you will burn out within a few years. I guarantee it. I'm sorry I said it, but it's true. This year, a great example is my schedule this year. I ran Quad Rock as a B race. It's a B race because it is important to me to, at Quad Rock, I had 3 goals. One was to practice fueling. Number 2 was to practice thermoregulation, so keeping myself cool in a hot environment. I'll talk more about that in a second. And then number 3 was to run fast and see how my body responds to a 80 to 85%-ish effort at a fast 50-mile pace. Those were my goals there. But, that's my B race. My A race is Western States. My other, we'll call it A- race, just because of where it lands in the season. And I don't know how, we'll see how recovering from Western goes, but Western is definitely more important to me than Leadville, even though it's so hard. I feel bad saying that. Like, I'm super excited to run Leadville too. Quite frankly, like, Leadville deserved its own year and its own build. The lottery gods bestowed a beautiful opportunity on me this year to run both Western States and Leadville. So, my Leadville training really is wrapped up in my Western States training. Luckily, both of the events require a lot of the same strengths. You have to be fast. There's a lot of great opportunities at Leadville to run on flat terrain. So the speed work that I did for Western is also fantastic for Leadville. Leadville can also be hot. I'll talk more about heat training here in a moment. So I'm already doing that. I am already getting in quite a bit of vert to train for the vert at Western States. Really, the only difference at Leadville is that the vert at Leadville is concentrated into the Hope Pass climbs. So there's that 24 miles where you're going up and down and up and down. So I'll do some steeper ascents and descents in July to prep for Leadville than like Western States, where those California trails are not as steep or technical as that stuff at Leadville is going to be. But anyways, and then I have a sea race that I'm just doing for fun, the Sangre de Cristo 100 in September. And everybody should take a moment to decide what is your A, your B, and your C race, maybe your A minus race as well. You have to decide what's important to you, because you can only train for so many A races throughout your year, right? You can't run an A race every 2 weeks or a race every 2 or 3 weeks and say they're all just as important to me as the last one. You're not going to run your best 100 miler in September if you ran a 100 miler that you also said was your A race 2 weeks before that, and then another one 2 weeks before that. See what I'm saying? Anyways, Quad Rock, let's talk a little bit more about it. I finished in 10th place. Considering the fact that David Roach and Riley Brady both got golden tickets and I can't remember if they got first and second or how that played out, but two of the people who beat me were golden ticket holders for Western States. So, oh shoot, I just hit my microphone. People on the video will see that, but people listening won't. Yeah, considering two of the people that beat me were Western States holders, golden ticket holders, I am pretty thrilled with how I did. Frankly, I didn't really care too much about my place, but I think it's cool. I got top 10 at an event with some really fantastic, elite athletes that do this full time. So I'm very, very proud of that. And I ran a 9:14. I beat my time from last year by 3 minutes, despite the fact that I finished, I guess you could say, only 3 minutes faster. I felt a lot stronger running the race this year. I felt a lot more in control. Last year when I finished Quad Rock, because this was my third time running Quad Rock, I finished with no energy. I was a zombie at the finish line. I was like keeled over a picnic table for like 3 hours. And considering the fact that this time I was energized and felt good at the finish line, I was very happy with my performance. Last year, I felt like I put in a 100% effort, and this year I felt like I put in a 80 to 85% effort. I found myself at mile 40, and I said to myself, there's a guy who's like at this aid station with me. I could probably race him and try to beat him if I want to, but my mentality was, this is a training run. I need to focus on this last 10 miles, just continuing doing what I came here to do, which is train for Western States. I need to get up and down the last ascent and descent healthy and feeling good. And that was my priority. It wasn't really a racing mindset out there. So to finish with a PR on this course and still be energized, I think was huge. Going in, like I said, I had 3 goals. Number 1 was fueling. Let's talk about that. During Quad Rock, I had 1,800 calories of fuel during the event, so that came out to about 200 calories per hour. I think that was okay. It wasn't exceptional, but for a 50 miler at a higher intensity, I started out the race running some 730 miles. I think that 200 calories per hour is pretty good for that kind of intensity. Most of my calories came from tailwind and also from just straight up maple syrup. I have a 250 milliliter soft flask of maple syrup or from Hydropack that I fill with maple syrup, and that can hold about 800 calories of syrup. Sounds funny, but the reason I do it is because physiologically speaking, if you're training for a hot weather race, your blood your blood flow when you're idle, not exercising, is typically going to your gut, to your GI tract. It helps you digest nutrients and absorb nutrients. But when you're running a hot event, which a lot of ultramarathons are pretty hot, especially from the hours of, say, 10 to 4 or 5 p.m. during a race, especially at Western States. One of my goals this year is to try and not have GI distress while I'm running Western, and it gets really hard to eat solid foods or Yeah, it gets really hard to eat. To Yeah, you lose your appetite typically when it's that hot because your blood flow is going uh to your skin, so away from your vital organs because your blood is pretty hot. So what it does is your blood plasma goes towards your skin, so it doesn't heat up your organs, and that keeps your organs cool. And the other thing that it does physiologically is your blood plasma is what you sweat out, and sweat. What you do is when you sweat out fluids from your blood plasma. Um, you that fluid goes to your skin and then it evaporates, and it's that act of the fluid evaporating that's what creates a cooling sensation that cools you off during an event. Why is this important? Because like I was saying before, your blood flow goes from your gut to your skin to help cool you off, and that makes it really hard to digest complex carbs, fatty foods, real solid foods. That's why it's so hard to eat for a lot of people during the middle of an ultra marathon. And then it gets easier to eat at night when the temperature is oftentimes cool off and you can scarf things down like ramen at aid stations. Anyways, the reason I'm using maple syrup is because I'm trying to figure out what the easiest way to take in calories during Western states is, because it's going to be really hot there. If you get into Western states, you have to expect that the canyons are going to be 110 degrees, and you have to figure out what your heat training plan and what your nutrition plan is going to be for that kind of heat. So, my plan is to go with liquid calories. I just finished grad school. If you listen to the last episode I did on how to become a registered dietitian, I talked about everything I had to do to be a dietitian. Let's just be real. When you're going through grad school, you're kind of broke. And yeah, I mean, I'm trying to start a business right now. It's still in the early stages and just don't have a ton of money to throw at, gels and yeah, so maple syrup is a lot cheaper and easier. And quite frankly, it has a very similar viscosity to what a gel is. And it's really calorie dense and it's full of simple carbs. Maple syrup consists of glucose and fructose. It's about a 1-to-1 ratio, which is also a really good ratio of different types of carbohydrates for your gut to absorb. So yeah, that's why I do the syrup, because it's easy. Maybe it sounds weird, maybe it sounds gross, but it's a pretty old, and I know it is a very old school way of fueling during running in the ultra, but it works, and it's been working for me in training. So I'm excited to see how it plays out at Western States. So yeah, that was my goal, was to practice my fueling plan. I noticed I actually consumed more calories in the second half of the race, and I had about 5.5 liters of fluid during the race. Again, most of which was in the second half of Quad Rock, so that showed me there's ample opportunity to improve my fueling in the first 25 miles of Western States going forward. Great takeaways. The other thing I did as a takeaway for training for Western was practice thermoregulation. So thermoregulation is in making sure my core body temperature was staying at a, we'll call it cooler temperature than not. Quad Rock got kind of hot. It was a 75, 80 degree day by the time the race finished, where I finished. So it started at like 5 or 6 a.m. I can't even remember. 5:30. And I finished, if I was 9 hours, that would be like 2:30 in the afternoon, right? Anyways, I didn't write it down before the show started. So, it got pretty warm by the end of the race, but I spent a lot of the event, every aid station from mile like 13 or 14 onwards. I was using arm sleeves and I was wearing a Hoka bucket hat. Had to buy the Hoka bucket hat Jim Walmsley wore when he won Western States a few years ago. So I got one of those. Just tipping my hat to him, I guess. So practice putting ice in the bucket hat, practice putting ice in the arm sleeves. I got to say, arm sleeves are a game changer. Definitely going to wear them for every hot weather race I run going forward, and you should consider it too. As a side note, it also helps keep the sun off of your arms too and prevent sunburn. I got the Zensa arm sleeves if anyone is looking for a recommendation, and they work pretty well. So yeah, I just practiced putting ice in all of my, my bandana or my buff, my hat and my arm sleeves, and filled up fluids at the aid stations, asked them to dump, for sponge baths and putting water all over my body. And yeah, it worked really well. I didn't do any heat training or I did a sauna a few times a week. starting in March and April, but I really upped that in May. And I'll talk about heat training in a little bit here too. So, yeah, that's what I did. I was very happy to see on Strava my moving time was only 13 minutes. There's only a 13-minute difference between my official finish time and my moving time, meaning I only spent 13 minutes at aid stations, taking the time to get ice and all of those areas. And yeah, it was just nice to see that I could do that really quickly. That gives me confidence that I won't be wasting too much time at Western. I don't want to say wasting. That's a bad phrase. It's an investment, really, because if you take the time at the aid stations to make sure your core body temperature is low, that'll help you run faster when you are on the trails. So it was a good investment. And then my last goal for Quad Rock was to run fast. And I feel like I did that pretty well. Finished in 10th with a time of 9:14 on a course with 11,000 feet of vertical gain and another 11,000 feet of vertical loss. I think that was pretty good. Yeah, and considering that I felt like I finished with energy, that's a good sign. I think Quad Rock as a course is harder than Western States. It is not hotter, but it is harder in that the trails are a bit more technical. And I mean, that's just ratio-wise more gain in a 50-mile race than, if you were to double 11,000 feet, that'd be 22,000 feet. Western States has 18,000 feet in total. So technically it is a little bit harder of a course. But yeah, that was my takeaways from Quad Rock. It was great practice for thermoregulation, great practice for fueling, got some awesome takeaways. And then the last phase of my training was just to fix anything that I feel like was maybe a little bit off during my Quad Rock build. So in the last 7 weeks of training, what I essentially did was starting 6 weeks out. So basically the week of, so the Wednesday after Quad Rock to the Wednesday before Western States, that's a 6-week window, which is absolutely perfect because I was following, and just for reference, Jason Koop put this up on his Instagram page, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm just taking something from his book that is not already public and making it public, because he has a great book, Training Essentials for Ultrarunning, and in that book he has a heat training protocol which is 6 weeks long. That is what I am following for Western States. There's a lot of great benefits of heat training, namely that it increases your blood plasma volume, so it gives you more blood plasma volume. And like I mentioned earlier, physiologically, your sweat comes from your blood plasma. So if you have more blood plasma volume, you have more fluids that you can lose during a hot race. And that also helps you cool off quicker. So heat training increases your blood plasma volume. It also increases your sweat, the onset of your sweat. So what I mean by that is, if you go to a sauna every day for about 10 to 14 days, one of the things you'll notice is that you actually start sweating sooner. So instead of starting to sweat 10 to 15 minutes into my session, I started sweating like 5 minutes into my session. Now when I go to the sauna, I am soaked after like 5 minutes with my own sweat. And that might sound counterintuitive, but it is the act of your sweat evaporating that cools you off. So if you start sweating sooner, even though you're losing more fluid, your blood plasma volume is already increased, and you can last longer in the sauna or in a hot environment like a race, and still feel cool. So there's that. Also, if you start your heat training 6 weeks out from race day, it takes about 5 weeks for your body to produce more hemoglobin, which helps you transport oxygen. So heat training is really good for increasing your body's ability to transport oxygen to your body, to your muscles. So if you're hearing this and you're training for a race like the Leadville 100, you should consider doing heat training starting about 6 weeks out from your event. Just for reference, the body acclimates to heat training pretty quickly. Like I said, you'll notice differences within 10 to 14 days. The plan I followed from Jason Koop's book is basically a 2-week heavy dose. So I basically went every day for 2 weeks, and then a 2-week easy dose. So every other day for 2 weeks. And then as I record this, June 12th, I just started my last 2-week dose of heat training yesterday, so now I'm going to be going to the sauna every single day for 2 weeks. And that'll put me at like Tuesday or Wednesday before Western States, and then I got to travel, so I probably won't get into the sauna Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday before the race. But you know, I know you lose a small percentage of your benefits because of that, but what is what it is. You can't control every single factor sometimes. Not everything is always within your control. Talking a lot, got to get a sip of coffee. All right, so that's what I'm doing for heat training. When I say fine tuning is my last stage of training, that is one of the things that I've been focusing on these last 7 weeks between Quad Rock and Western States. The other thing that I was doing is always the month before an event, I up my physical therapy exercises, not because I'm injured. I actually got through this training cycle really injury free. I don't think I had like one or two very, very minor shin issues, which is typical for me during my training block, but nothing that caused me to miss workouts or mileage, which I was very lucky for. I've been doing PT once a week for my shins, my hips, and my what's the last one? Shins, hips, and hamstrings for the last 3 months. And the month before an event, I always up that. I try to hit every major group. So those groups typically for me, I try to hit all those like 3 to 4 times per week each, which is really time consuming. But the way I see it is, this is Western States. Like, if I'm on race day and something starts hurting me and I think to myself, if only I did more PT to prevent this from happening, I will be so upset with myself. But I generally speaking do this before all of my big events just because I want my body to be very durable. And the reason that I focus on shins, hips, and hamstrings is because those are the areas where I've had issues with while running 100-mile races in the past. Everybody's different. Our bodies might look symmetrical, but that doesn't mean they are. So, work with a physical therapist. If something has bothered you in the past, make sure you're doing what you can to prevent that in the future. And then the last part of fine tuning for Western States was, honestly, I'm really happy with my fitness level. I don't think I can get that much faster, and I don't think I can get that much better at this point. I've been training, like I said, 3 to 4 hours a day. I mean, what is that? That's got to be like semi-professional athlete kind of level. So I'm really ready to race. I don't think I can get much faster. I don't think I can get that much durable or fitter. I'm ready to go. So I did the 3 weeks after Quad Rock, I did a 21 miler, or I think 2 weeks after I did like a 17 miler, and then I did a 21 miler 3 weeks after Quad Rock, and then yesterday, Wednesday, June 11th, 16 days, 17 days out from race day, I did my last long run, which was a 22 miler. So just really trying to maintain my fitness with a few long runs, getting in a few last doses of speed training. I'm not really trying to get faster at this point as much as I'm trying to maintain my speed. The reason I did my hardest speed workout in April is because the more intensity you do while you're training for an event, whether that's an ultra or a marathon or lower distance, the more intensity you do, the greater chance of injury that you have. And, I'm not ever going to win a golden ticket. I don't foresee that in my future. Running Western States is something that as a lottery applicant, I will be able to do every 5 to 10 years until I die. Maybe, in 10 years, ultra running might be even more popular than it is now. And then who knows, maybe it'll take 15 years to get into Western States. This is not something I'm going to be able to do very frequently. So to me, it is not worth the risk of getting 2% faster to add in like a really hard speed workout. So I've really just been trying to maintain my speed. And now it is Thursday, June 12th. This is the first day technically that I am beginning to start my taper. So that's phase 5, tapering. This week I'm a run. Last week I ran 70 miles. Yesterday I ran 22 miles as my last long run. So my week will still be decently high mileage, but I think it's going to end up being a 55 to a 60-mile week. And then next week will be a 40-mile week, and then it's race week. So not running a whole lot during race week, maybe 10 to 15 miles Monday through Friday. So not going to be doing a whole lot of training that week, as you can imagine. Really, most of my time for the next 2 weeks will be spent going to the sauna, getting physical therapy exercises in. I'll have a few like 10-mile runs up like Green Mountain here in Boulder, which is, I know it's like a 3,000-foot route of gain, but that's in my backyard. It's my favorite mountain. Like, I'm gonna just take it easy and do a few laps of green with the time remaining before race day. But yeah, that's basically how I did my Western States training. There were a lot of great takeaways in there. There were basically 10 things overall that I did within that training block. Within everything I just said, I think there's 10 big takeaways that I'm going to review to finish up this episode. So those 10 things were, number one, super obvious. If you're training for an event, like the number one thing you got to do if you're training is you got to get in the miles. So if you're getting in the miles, that looks different for everyone. We talked about how to get those miles in, building a base, doing your speed work and your long runs, doing maybe a tune-up race a few weeks out from your event, and then fine-tuning whatever you need. Honestly, that last step is optional. Those last two, you don't have to run a tune-up race. You don't have to fine-tune anything if you don't want. Frankly, if Western States was when Quad Rock was, like, I probably would have been really good to go, but I wanted a little bit of buffer time. That's just a personal choice to fine-tune everything in case anything went wrong during training, whether that's I needed to get faster or whether that's an injury came up. So that's why I added in. Yeah, that's why I had a little bit of time between Quad Rock and Western States, but that's a personal decision. Making sure you put some easy weeks on your calendar to make sure your body's recovered, which is what I did every fourth week of my calendar, basically. So yeah, getting in the miles is always step number one. Step number two, specificity. So whatever race you're training for, and you could call this a subsection or sub goal of like the 10 things I'm doing to prepare for Western, because it's part of your mileage, is, when you're training for a race, you have to look at like, what's the vertical profile? What are the variables that are unique to the event that you're training for that you need to prepare for? So for Western States, that's speed work, because there's a lot of opportunity on that course to run fast. The course record there is like 14 hours and 9 minutes by Jim Walmsley. That's really fast for a mountain ultra, which means it's a fast course. So if you're running a really fast course, you need to do speed work if you want to do your best there. You also need to be a good uphill runner. The climbs there, from what I understand, are not particularly, they're not like a lot of the trails. I live in Boulder, Colorado. A lot of the trails here up mountains are really steep. You have to hike them. 99% of people hike them, even as a great trail runner. I think I'm pretty good. I hike all of those, all of those uphills. But there's a fair amount of uphill running that you can do at Western. Conversely, there's a fair amount of downhill running. So you need to make sure you're pounding your quads for a race like Western. So, specificity is part two of getting in the miles. You got to train for what you're going to be racing on. And then that leads me to the third thing I did for Western States, heat training. I already talked about the protocol that I'm following. If you want to find more about that, I recommend purchasing Jason Koop's Training Essentials for Ultra Running book, or you can go on his Instagram. He posted a picture pretty recently of his heat training protocol. He also has a few great podcast episodes on heat training with, one of them is with like Julian Perriard. Highly recommend listening to that one. Super informational. Also, another thing I did was sodium sweat test. So I met with a registered dietitian, Dina Griffin. She is otherwise known as the nutrition mechanic, and I did a sweat test with her. I guess you don't have to do yours with her. Obviously, you might not live in Boulder if you're listening to this, but she works with Precision Hydration. I'm pretty sure she does it through them. If you go on Precision's website, you can search for a sweat testing facility near you. They work with registered dietitians to offer sweat testing to athletes. I unfortunately don't offer sodium sweat testing because, according to Precision, they have too many people in the Boulder area who already offer it. But if you are in Boulder and you're listening to this and you want to work with Dina, tell her I sent you, and she'll give me a little kickback, which is really nice of her. I appreciate that. Just being super honest and upfront. I'm not sponsored or an ambassador for anyone. We're just two people who are dietitians, and if she has anybody she recommends to me, I appreciate that from her. And in this case, if you're interested in learning more about the contents of your sweat, then you can go to her. And when I say contents of your sweat and sodium sweat test, for those who aren't familiar with what a sodium sweat test is, a sodium sweat test is basically a test that measures how much sodium you lose per liter of sweat. So if you're losing 1 liter of sweat, or at least when I took my test, my number was 820 milligrams per liter. So I lose 820 milligrams of sodium per liter of sweat. Most people are sweating out it really depends on the person's sweat. Your concentration of sodium that you lose in your sweat, that's a genetic number. So you only have to do this test once to find out what your sodium sweat losses are. So that's something that's really good. Also, your sweat rate is something that changes with basically how much heat training you're doing, and what the temperature outside is, and what the intensity that you're running at is. So it can really vary on a case-by-case basis, but what you can do is go for a run in, say, 90-degree weather if you're training for Western, and weigh yourself before and after your run, and you can figure out like how much water weight that you lost, otherwise known as sweat, how much sweat you lost over the course of your run if you weigh yourself before and after. You also have to make sure if you're going to do that, you can't take a leak or use the bathroom, because that also influences how much weight you lose, right? Just throwing that out there. But the sodium sweat test is a big puzzle piece, because if you are consuming, say, you start Western States or any race for that matter with 1 liter of water, which is typically what ultra runners do, is we have our pack and we have 2 500 milliliter bottles on us. For someone losing like 800 milligrams like me of sodium in their sweat, making sure you have like 600 or 700 milligrams of sodium in your bottles is really important, because you also have to assume you're going to get some sodium in from whatever foods you eat at the aid station, whether maybe you're probably not having ramen in the middle of the hot day, but you might have like potato chips, or you might have some bars or some gels that have some sodium in there, and you want to make sure that you're leaving some room for that, because you don't want to have too much sodium when you're fueling at a race, but you definitely don't want to have too little. So I did a sweat test to help myself dial in my electrolyte needs. And that was also very helpful at Quad Rock, which I was practicing. Yeah, I think that's all I got to say on sodium sweat test. I think that they're super useful. They are kind of expensive. They're like $250 is what their range is, I think. But yeah, you can find a facility near you. Beware of the at-home tests, because they are not always very accurate. On a similar note, like I also mentioned, one of my goals at Quad Rock was to practice fueling. So that includes hydration and electrolytes, but that also includes nutrition. So I talked a lot about physiology in this episode. My plan for Western States is generally to follow a liquid diet because of the heat. It's going to be really hard to take in actual food when it's 110 degrees in the canyons out there. So I've been doing maple syrup, and that seems to be working pretty well. And you should also figure out what works for you and practice that in your training. That should be self-explanatory. If you're training for a race that matters to you, you should be practicing your fueling strategy. Every run that's like 10 to 15 miles or more in your training block leading up to your race for probably a good month or two, just to make sure you're comfortable with it and that you have time to make adjustments if you need to. The other thing that I do for training is physical therapy exercises. I talked about that for my shins, my hips, my shins, hips, and hamstrings. Oh, here's one I haven't talked about. Another thing I'm doing to prep, taking creatine. So creatine from a physiological perspective is going to be much more useful for, say, a sprinter like Usain Bolt. So it's not really something that's going to bolster performance. However, the way creatine works is it uh, it basically helps you retain a pound or two extra of water weight. So the reason I actually started taking it in March, and I've been taking it basically every day since March, is because creatine. I figured it just couldn't hurt to go into Western states with an extra pound or two of water weight. Um, from the information from the articles I've read and the podcasts I've listened to from people who are experts and scientists on this subject, it sounds like there's really no drawback to from like a performance perspective for like weighing an extra pound or two. I also I don't even own a scale. I don't really weigh myself. I think I think I did put on like a pound or two over the course of this training block because I've also been doing strength training and lifting at the gym a bit more frequently. I got a gym membership so I could use the sauna. I was like, well, I might as well lift weights a little bit more frequently. So I think that's also where, I might have gained a pound or two, but I have been taking creatine. Wanted to be upfront about everything I'm doing for preparing and training for Western in this podcast episode. So that is one of the things I've been doing as well. Um, and then really the last few things I've been doing are logistics. So taking the time to study the course, to listen to podcasts about the course. I don't want to go into Western states knowing what every twist and turn looks like. Part of the reason I love ultrarunning is because it's a great way to explore different parts of the country and challenge myself and meet new people. So I don't want to go into any new race I do knowing everything about it. But like I said, this is not a once in a lifetime, hopefully not a once in a lifetime opportunity, but it is once in a say every decade opportunity that as an ultra runner you get to do. And um, I did want to know the course a little bit better than I know other courses as I go into this event. So, I spent a fair amount of time studying the course profile, but more importantly, I would say there's two podcasts that really helped me prepare for this mentally, and that was both actually with Andy Jones Wilkins, otherwise known as AJW. He did one with the first one I listened to with him was with Jason Fitzgerald of the Strength Running podcast? Forgive me, I think that's the name of his podcast. But he did a really good episode with Jason on Western states and preparing for it. And that was super helpful. The one that I like even more was the episode AJW did with Jason Coop on the Coopcast. I think if you just type in Western States 100 Coopcast, you'll find the episode on Spotify, Apple, wherever. And I've listened to that episode countless times. I actually liked it so much that I sent it over to my parents and my pacer and told them to listen to it because it has a lot of great information for both runners who are preparing for the event, who are trying to visualize the event, but also there is a segment of that episode dedicated to crewing Western states, and there's a lot of great information that's super helpful in there. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. On a similar note, I spend a fair amount of time, I've got a lot of time in the sauna, man. When you're in there for like 30 plus minutes every single day for multiple weeks on end, you have a lot of time to spend visualizing what it's going to be like to be on that Western States course. So spend a fair amount of time visualizing the highs, the lows, the heat, what the aid station transitions are going to look like, the successes, potential failures, at the race, and just visualizing what success is going to look like there and how I'm going to respond when times are tough. Everybody wants to, I tell this to people when I'm coaching them all the time. Everybody wants to visualize that finish line feeling, what it's going to look and feel like to cross that finish line of their dream race. But you also, I highly recommend doing that, but I also recommend spending time visualizing what is it going to be like to be in my case, what's it going to be like to be in the 110-degree heat of the canyons? What am I going to do if I'm struggling? What am I going to eat if my stomach is not feeling good? What am I going to drink if my stomach again is maybe not feeling good? How am I going to cool off if I'm overheating? Stuff like that. So just making sure you're prepared for everything that comes your way, taking the time to sit down. Maybe you're not doing heat training for the race you have coming up, but In that case, cross your legs, meditate, close your eyes, spend some time thinking about what you're going to be doing, what your race is going to look like, both the highs and the lows. And the last thing I'm doing to prep for Western is crew meeting. I made I know it might be excessive, but like a 30-page, 30-slide PowerPoint for my crew just to review everything. I'm going to be reviewing that with my crew 2 weeks out from race day. Western States it looks like a big party, like the days leading up to it. They have events on Thursday and Friday, and on Sunday after the event. There's just a lot of stuff that's going to be going on. The last thing I want to do is be educating my crew at the last minute when I have a million things on my mind as to like where we're meeting and like what I need from them at aid stations. Like, so I'm doing my crew meeting 14 days out or 13 days out from the race. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. I want to make sure everybody has an understanding of like what they can do to best assist me on my journey to run a sub 24-hour time there, because that is my A goal, to run sub 24 hours at Western States. I'm not talking about if I'm going to do that. I'm talking about how am I going to do that. And I know exactly how I'm going to do that. I want them to know how they can best support that vision. And we're going to get it done. But yeah, I hope we covered a lot of subjects really quickly, I feel like, in this episode. Been recording for about an hour, and we covered basically phases of training. We covered physiology. We covered a lot of topics about nutrition. Covered quite a few subjects. I hope this was helpful. This is how I am training for the Western States 100. Oh, and I guess the last thing I'll talk about is just, I do have Leadville coming up after Western. Really, the only thing I'm going to do differently as in those weeks leading up to Western States is I'm just going to add some steeper climbs and some steeper descents into my training in probably, it'll probably take a few weeks to recover from Western. It's going to be a hard effort. I don't plan on taking the race easy, if you can't tell. It is not a race I'm going to be just cakewalking it in and chatting at aid stations. I'm going to be moving. I'm going to be sore, and it's going to take probably a good 2 or 3 weeks to recover. My guess is I'll be running within 2 weeks, but that doesn't mean running well, right? So maybe about mid to late July, I'm going to start doing some specificity for Leadville. So just steeper climbs, steeper descents, but I'm also still going to get some speed work in. And I actually think that one of the big things people don't prep for Leadville with is heat training. I don't foresee myself doing another 6-week training block of heat training and sauna work. I'm getting kind of burnt out from all the extra time that it is requiring of me for Western. So I'll probably do a solid 2-week block of heat training while I'm tapering for Western or for Leadville. We talked about how heat training increases plasma volume and hemoglobin levels. So that's also really good for altitude training. If you know of anyone who lives in like a lower elevation place, like even Florida or the East Coast, they say that heat training is the poor man's altitude training, but it does a lot of the same things. So if you are struggling to prepare for altitude or figure out how, heat training is the way to go. So I'm going to be doing that because Leadville can get pretty hot. I am personally not worried about the altitude. I live at 5,000 feet. I've lived at 5,000 feet for 8 years now. The altitude really doesn't bother me. So that's what I'm going to do just to prep for the potential heat at Leadville. But yeah, that's my preparing for Western States and Leadville podcast. I hope that you found value in this episode. If you liked the topics I was talking about, please feel free to like, rate, subscribe to the show. Like I said, you could financially support me too and download some of my training documents on my website. Those are really, really good and thorough. If you think this episode was thorough, then you'll get a lot of the same information in those documents, except it's written out for you. I think that's all. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. You can reach out to me at journeyruncoaching.com if you're interested in coaching or a registered dietitian. And you can also email me at journeyrunningllc@gmail.com if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, want to chat about anything. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and reach out if you decide to do so. Signing off.